Who are the best skill position players on the offensive side of the ball in NFL history? That's what we're going to be answering today. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Gridiron Talk Zone. We have three of us, our famous trio. I'm Nick. I have John on my, I don't know what side, Graham on my other side. But yeah, that's going to be our crew today, and we're going to be covering the top 32 skill position players on the offensive side of the ball in NFL history. So, skill position players, those are your running backs, your wide receivers, and your tight ends. We're going to do an all time draft like we did for the quarterbacks. If you watch that, it's going to be pick 1 to pick 32. Graham is going to be picking number 1. John picked number 2. I'm picked number 3. And then it goes back to Graham, then to John, then to me. So, anyway, let's talk a little bit. So, what do you guys look for? I look for, obviously, the talent of the player. Similar to the quarterbacks, the talent, the statistics, the accolades, how did they fail compared to the guys of their era, and then comparing them to the other guys in the history of the game. And then, what else did I factor in? Playoff performance matters a little bit for me. Big game moments. Obviously, longevity can influence stuff, but that's not a big one for me. But impact on NFL is another one that's big for me. What impact did you have on the NFL and the future of the league? So anyway, do you guys have anything to say before we get started?
Nope. I'm ready. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay. With the first pick, I'll send it over to you, Graham. Who is the best offensive skill player in the history of pro football?
Well, I think with no debate here,
No debate.
the best skill position NFL player is going to be the main man himself, Jerry Rice.
All right. So number 1, Jerry Rice. What do you have to say about Jerry Rice?
I mean, nearly 200 career receiving touchdowns. What does he got? 4 Super Bowls, right? If I'm thinking of it correct.
3.
3 Super Bowls. Sorry, he didn't get. And he only. I mean, you look at his stats. Really great, as I mentioned, almost 200 passing touchdowns. Where is his receiving yards? Why can I not find those right now?
He's number 1 in receiving yards.
Receiving yards. That's what I thought.
5,000 yards.
I thought Larry Fitz was closer, but I guess not. But he has almost 23,000 receiving yards. He has the most career receiving touchdowns. Like, he leads the receivers in most categories. He has like the most career all-purpose yards, I believe, as well. Like he had a little bit of dabble with the rushing game, a little bit throughout his career, but like, I mean, almost 1,600 receptions. I mean, the guy was just a beast. 3 Super Bowls. Joe Montana's right-hand man. He's honestly, in my opinion, one of the GOATs of the NFL. So I think number 1 fits him right here. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I just want to add something. The most impressive thing, I think, out of all the things he did in his career, winning a Super Bowl, and then winning a Super Bowl MVP, I mean, because he won multiple Super Bowls. Then in 1988, having one of the best receiver playoffs of all time. The most impressive thing that stands out to me is at age 40 in 2002, he had 1,200 yards. 40-year-old receiver putting up 1,200 yards is ridiculous. It's hard to put up 1,200 yards at any age, and he did that at age 40.
Crazy.
Something that we've never seen a receiver even come close to that. So, just the longevity, the peak, the big games, the connection with Montana, the stats being far ahead of any other receiver volume-wise. He led the league in touchdown receptions 6 times, receiving yards 6 times too. Just an all-around beast. John, do you want to add anything before you pick your number 2?
No, he's just undisputed. And it's disputed that he's the actual GOAT of football. And at the wide receiver position, that's very impressive. And also the playoff accolades, as you mentioned, are insane.
Yeah, okay. So, John, you have the number 2 pick. I think those are 1, 2, 3, any of them can be number 1. I just think the longevity is kind of what leans Rice over the other 2 guys for me. But I think that there's a strong case for 2 other guys to be number 1, too, me personally. But some may disagree with that. But who is your number 2?
With the number 2 pick, I'm going with Jim Brown.
All right, Jim Brown at number 2. I like that pick, too. He was my number 2. John, talk about Jim Brown.
Well, just listing up the stats, he has 12,000 career rushing yards in 9 seasons, 106 touchdowns, 5.2 yards per attempt, the highest yards per game, and the only running back to ever have over 100 yards per game. 3-time MVP, 8-time All-Pro, 8-time rushing leader. He's just amazing. And looking at some of his film earlier, he was the biggest, strongest, and quickest guy on the field, and it was just like a cheat code with him out on the field. It often took like 2 or 3 people to tackle him, and sometimes even that wouldn't work.
Yeah, I agree. Jim Brown, number 2. Like you said, he led the league in almost every rushing stat every year he played football. Some think he retired early because, like, his last year, he only played 9 years. In his last year, he put up over 1,500 yards and 17 touchdowns. So that was a historic last year, and he won MVP in his last year, only age 29. So he retired very early, but see, that's the thing. If he played another 5-7 years, he's the undisputed GOAT of football. That's why I said I think you can still make a case for him being better than Rice just because how dominant he was for his entire career, being the best player in the NFL every year he played football. But I think that you have to give it to Rice because of the longevity. But anyway, on to number 3. This is the guy that I think also has a case for one. I think he's part of the big 3. Jersey's behind me, but Don Hutson, the Alabama Antelope, played for the Green Bay Packers back in 1935 to 1945. Some of you may say, who is Don Hutson? The most dominant player in football for the first 50 years of pro football. To start, he was not only one of the fastest guys in football, or the fastest guy in football, he was one of the fastest guys in the entire world when he played. He's one of the fastest NFL players of all time. He ran a 9.8 yard, 100-yard dash, which is incredibly fast. Most of his highlights, you see him just behind the defense because back in 1935, the 16th year of pro football, it was definitely a run league. Wasn't even thought to pass on early downs, and Don Hutson changed that. He was the first receiver to actually run like good route concepts, be quick on his cuts, accelerate, and make it tough for corners to cover him. And like a lot of modern routes, Don Hutson was the first to run those in the NFL. But just going past his impact, like I said, his talent, his speed, his touchdowns, 99 career regular season touchdowns. That was the most in NFL history until it was broken by Steve Largent in the 1980s. So it took over 40 years to break his own record. He had like over triple the touchdowns of second place when he retired. Dominated his era statistically, led the league in yards 7 times, 8-time first-team All-Pro, only receiver to win MVP, and he won it twice. He also played safety and kicker, not that I'm counting that, in his offensive abilities, because that's defense. But yeah, just the ultimate dominant player and one of the best players in NFL history. Do you guys have anything to add?
Nope. I just want to say that in one season, he averaged 25 yards per reception,
That's ridiculous.
which is
Like,
insane.
Absolutely.
What was his yards per game average that highest year? Was it 1942?
It was, let me get there. Highest yards per game average? 42, yeah.
But what was the
110
number?
yards per game.
Yeah, that's very high. But yeah, just dominant. They played shorter seasons there too, and just leading the league and everything. Absolutely changing the receiver position. I think Don Hutson at 3 makes a lot of sense. And now on to number 4. It is Graham's pick. Let's see. This was my 1, 2, 3 on my papers. Let's see if. Well, first off, I don't know which you guys have Don Hutson.
I had him at 9.
I had him 5.
Okay, respectable. On to number 4 though. See if we can make it 4 in a row for at least my list. Who's number 4, Graham?
I think number 4, the second best wide receiver of all time, Randy freaking Moss.
That was a little bit of a shocker. Not saying it's a bad pick because I love Randy Moss, but that shocked me a little bit.
I think when you just watch Randy Moss play football, there's a reason why there's a whole segment on ESPN on Monday Night Football called You Got Mossed. The dude is just so athletically gifted. He's probably the most athletically gifted wide receiver between height, speed, athleticism, maybe until Calvin Johnson got into the NFL.
Oh,
Mhm.
I think he's even more talented than Calvin.
I don't
Johnson.
think so. Maybe we'll get to Calvin Johnson later. But Randy Moss, in my opinion, is the second best wide receiver of all time. I think the only other person who could catch Randy Moss to put him above second or first is Justin Jefferson, who also played for the Vikings. I mean, the guy had nearly 1,600 receiving or 16,000 receiving yards, played in 15 seasons, which for a receiver is a pretty good amount. He was a part of the nearly perfect New England Patriots team. Ask John about that. Got nearly 160 touchdown receptions, and he was a part of 6 Pro Bowls. And he also led the league in receiving touchdowns. I want to say like 5 or 6 times, which is absolutely ridiculous
Yeah,
due
he led
to
the
his
league in receiving touchdowns 5 times.
yeah, which is absolutely ridiculous for a wide receiver because he was just such a red zone threat and such a deep ball threat because of how tall and how fast he was. I mean, it's kind of amazing to watch Randy Moss's stats and to watch his highlights throughout his career when he played for the Vikings and then when he went to New England, even a little bit of his time in Oakland was pretty cool.
Yeah, John, I'll let you talk about Randy Moss before I finish up on him. First off, let us know where you had him and then talk about
Randy Moss, I had at 4, and
him. Okay.
he was just so dominant. Like he could make any catch. His catch radius is probably the biggest of any receiver in history, and he does have the single season reception touchdown record, and the accolades and stats are there, and also the traits are there. So there's
Yeah, Randy Moss, I had a number 7. I did not expect him to go top 5. I thought I was high on him. But yeah, Randy Moss, I texted you, John, this while I was watching his film. Most fun highlights I've ever watched.
Yeah.
Just like you said, the catch radius is phenomenal. I've never seen a receiver be able to separate whenever, like, he separates in midair better than any receiver I've ever seen. He'll just jump and create a ton of separation somehow. It's not like he is mossing guys, but it's not like he's catching it on the helmet like a Calvin Johnson. He's separating and catching it over them in the air. Just that height speed combination, like you guys mentioned. Rare talent. Some reasons why I have him at 7. Where the career was amazing. What he did with the touchdown catch was amazing. Not that this is like a huge knock. He did never win a Super Bowl, and he never led the league in receiving yards. But what he did with the touchdown leading the league, and that was phenomenal. Finished 3rd place MVP as a rookie with the 98, 15-1 Vikings. So, yeah, just very impressive career. One of the most talented players of all time. I think he's a top 2 receiver talent of all time. I think him and perhaps Julio Jones are the most talented receivers of all time. But, yeah, Randy Moss at 4. Now that I think about it, I like it, although I slightly disagree with it. On number 5, John, this is your pick. Who's at number 5?
I'm going with Barry Sanders at number 5.
All right, Barry Sanders.
Another running back, but 15,000 rushing yards in just 10 seasons. 99 touchdowns, 5 yards per attempt, 1-time MVP, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, and 6-time All-Pro. And just watching some highlights on him earlier, he was so elusive, and oftentimes there would be defenders in the backfield, and he would have the ability to get past them and still accelerate, and just the explosiveness that he has. He is disputed to be the greatest running back of all time, and I even had him as the greatest until starting research on this. But yeah, I picked him at number 5.
Yeah, Barry Sanders, phenomenal. Like you said, what stands out with him is the elusiveness. One of the probably the most elusive runner to ever play, because Jim Brown, he was very elusive himself, but he wasn't Barry as far as elusiveness goes. The 5.0 yards per attempt, out of the all-time running backs, that stands up with Jim Brown's 5.2 yards per attempt. Just rushing for 5 yards carry with the amount of attempts he was getting just over his career is phenomenal. Again, the 1 MVP, 2-time Offensive Player of the Year, led the league in rushing yards 4 times, 6-time first-team All-Pro, and did it all on a bad franchise at the time, the Detroit Lions. Just phenomenal, impressive career. I had him at number 4, but yeah, I like him making it in the top 5. You want to add anything, Graham?
I would also say Barry Sanders kind of, in my opinion, kind of started the revolution for running backs to start catching the pass in the backfield too. I mean, he had some.
I don't think he started that, but he definitely was pretty good at that.
Yeah, he was really good at that. I think, to be honest.
Okay, I'm gonna teach you of a guy you may not know of who played in the 1950s in a little bit, but I'll tell you something. Maybe the bell cow running backs who were also good receivers. Well, I mean, O.J. Simpson was kind of that too,
I was
but
about
not. Maybe not to the Sanders
yeah.
extent. But I get what you're saying. Like the just best running back in the league while also being a dominant receiver.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. But on to number 6. Any guesses who I'm going to pick from you guys?
Really hope it's the person who I plan on picking with the next pick.
Oh,
I won't give
all
you a
right.
name.
Okay. Well, it's not like I'm going to try to steal a pick. I already have my pick. I'm just typing it out real quick. My number 6 pick is the guy who's on the poster behind me, Walter Payton.
Not who I was going to pick.
Okay, Walter Payton. I had him at 5. Just phenomenal. You talk about the talent. This dude hardly ever ran out of bounds. He ran so tough while also being so elusive. Just always seemed to stay on his feet. You see clips of him. I think there was famous clip versus the Chiefs. He just rolls off your whole entire team and just keeps running. Very tough to tackle. What was amazing, like I said, how he hardly ran out of bounds was his great cutbacks. One of the best cutback running backs of all time. And he is, I believe, like 2 or 3 in all-time rushing yards. 4.4 yards per attempt. Did play for the Bears, who weren't good for most of his career. 5-time first-team All-Pro, 1-time MVP. He only led the league in rushing yards once, so that was a little disappointing. But I just think factoring overall, the talent was insane. The 5 first-team All-Pros, MVP, and being very high up statistically on all-time stats. I think you have to put him as the 3rd best running back of all time behind Brown and Sanders. So he comes in at number 5 for me. John, would you have him?
I had him at 6.
Okay, so about the same range. What about you, Graham?
I had him at 8, but it was really close between like 5 to 10.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can understand having him at 8 because I think there's a big top 8. And then I think there's everyone's pretty close, but I think the top 8 kind of separate themselves for me.
I will say, I also factor for like all-time players, like their impact they have on the NFL on and off the field.
Yeah.
So Walter Payton, the impact he had off the field is also very important to me. But
you know what? Now that you say that, I didn't even think of that, but that's a good point.
Yeah, I had Walter Payton at 8, and I just think, honestly, if he played like 2 or 3 more really good seasons, like top tier seasons, he would be the best running back of all time. But I think there's one more running back I have in between Barry Sanders and Walter Payton for like the top 4 or 5 running backs of all time.
Yeah, his last year he was injured. That's mainly what hurt him. But
Yep.
in the MVP running multiple times and actually won one. So what do you have to whose pick is it, Graham? Who do you have at number? What are we at?
The 7th.
Who do you have at number 7?
For the 7th pick, I have I gotta stop picking these guys that I don't like. I did it in the quarterbacks draft, and I'm gonna do it again. I'm picking Emmitt Smith, like one of the greatest Dallas Cowboys of all time.
Okay, man. Do you have an explanation?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I was kind of expecting you to say something there.
No, I had him at number 8, so I'm kind of right with you.
So I have Emmitt Smith at 4th overall, and I think Emmitt Smith, honestly, looking at his career, I mean, he has 18,000 rushing yards, and he has the NFL record in rushing touchdowns, which is 164. I mean, he also had over 500 receptions for 3,000 yards receiving, which is really good for a running back, I would say, throughout a career. I mean, the guy is just so elusive. Was probably the cause of the Dallas Cowboys' insane 1990s era. He played for 15 seasons, which is also a pretty good like duration for a skill player and a running back. He had 11 straight seasons of 1,000 yards. That is ridiculous. The guy was a workhorse. He was the bell cow. and he was the team MVP every last one of those Super Bowls. He never really led the NFL in any rushing statistic like per year, but he
He
was.
did.
No, he didn't. Did he?
He led the league in
Yeah, he did.
rushing
Yeah, he
4
did.
times
4
and
times. Sorry,
touchdowns.
I
Yeah.
looked at it and
No,
I
you're
was
good.
looking at it wrong.
You're good.
My bad. That is on me. It's a bad statistical version of Graham. I'm looking on the Hall of Fame website right now. That's where I'm getting some of these
Oh.
stats from. But excluding that, I mean, other than the weird stint with the Arizona Cardinals, where he was still decently good, you look at the Cowboys, Emmitt Smith, and it's like watching like like Superman play on the football field, in my opinion.
Okay, so Emmitt Smith, really good player. Had him at number 8. I think there's a slight gap between Brown, Sanders, and Peyton. Smith, although I do think Smith is kind of a little slightly ahead of 5 at running back too. I think there's a little gap between him and Walter. Yes, Will, his all-time stats are amazing. I don't. Will he was very good for a long stretch. He was only super dominant for a little short stretch. 4 straight first team All Pro seasons. Well, he won MVP during that stretch. But yeah, his career yards per carry 4.2, solid. But considering that he ran behind a very good Hall of Fame, was on his O line, little lower than you would expect. Very good receiver too, so I'll give him credit for that. But yeah, like you said, the accolades are there, the stats are there. Just think that guys like Walter Sanders and Jim Brown were a little bit more talented runners than Emmitt Smith, so that's what separates them from me. But still, an all-time talent. I have it number 8. What about you, John?
I have it number 7, and something that stands out to me for Emmitt Smith is the longevity, which is something that the running backs ahead of him don't have. And that is the main reason why he is the leader in yards and touchdowns.
All right, John, it's your pick at number 8. I have a feeling who you're gonna pick, and I think I'm gonna slightly disagree with it. But go ahead.
Terrell Owens.
Oh.
Right.
Whoa!
Wow.
Whoa! Hot take.
Hot take?
Very
Big
hot
hot
take. I'm boiling over here.
Really?
Okay, John, go over to Terrell Owens. Better give us a good
explanation.
analysis because I'm gonna debate this one very hard.
Okay. So Terrell Owens, I had him at number 8. I personally think he's the number 3 receiver of all time because he is top 3 in.
Wait, didn't you have Rice?
Right. Oh yeah,
Hudson and Moss?
Hudson. He's number 4.
Okay.
So he is top 3 in receiving yards and reception touchdowns, I believe. A 5-time All-Pro, and the vertical threat that he poses was very good. And just looking at how he stacks up all time, I put him at number 8 and my 4 receiver.
Okay. I'm gonna scroll down for this Graham talk.
Okay,
Where'd you have him?
Well, I had Terrell Davis at the 12 spot. I thought 12 was maybe a little high for Terrell Owens. Excuse me.
Terrell Owens. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have him as the 5th best wide receiver of all time. But you're definitely right. Like the vertical threat Terrell Owens had, and another thing is for all the many different teams he played for all the drama that he brought, the dude still balled out there for any team. I have a lot of respect for him for playing through a torn ACL. Like the guy was a baller. The attitude problem was a little iffy, but I think he makes up for all that stupid off the field crap for how many teams he played for and how good he was throughout all of that. But I just don't think he had enough. I don't think he has enough accolades and enough I don't know how to word it, but
His accolades are there as far as first team All Pros. But
but
his stats accolades
yeah,
his
but
leading the league.
yeah,
And stuff
he doesn't have that the stuff that it wows you on the paper.
Like he never won an offensive player of the year, which
Yeah.
it's hard for receivers to do that in the 2000s. But yeah, okay, I thought you were with me on this one. Maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. I had Terrell Owens at number 21.
Oh,
So
Oh wow,
this is the biggest difference I think that we're gonna see on this list.
probably.
Okay, anyway, the 5-time first team All Pro, that is what wows me. What he did with the touchdown catch, 156 career touchdowns. I believe that's the same number as Randy Moss. Let me check that. Yep, same number as Randy Moss. That was impressive. The ability to play on different teams with different quarterbacks and still produce, impressive. So all the things I'm saying sound super impressive. Here's where I'm at with Terrell Owens, though. Neville was the best playoff performer. I'll say that he did disappoint in some of his playoff performances, although that wasn't like huge big deal. And while he's a very talented receiver, what stands out is his run after catch ability. I think there's more talented receivers out there, like a Randy Moss, a Julio Jones. Even I go Calvin Johnson, Jerry Rice, Larry Fitzgerald, just other guys I like a little bit more talent wise. But he was my number 5 receiver because the accolades and everything that stacks up. But just comparing him to these running backs that I had ahead of him, who were winning Offensive Player of the Years left and right, him never doing that is kind of what held him back for me. But I still think 21 is a pretty good ranking considering all the great players on this list. And there's just a lot of running backs who accomplished way more while also being more statistically dominant than Terrell Owens. That made them ahead of him for me. But yes, I think we agree in the receiver range, the 4-5 range all time. It's just comparing him to the running backs. I had to put a lot of running backs over him. That's where our differences were. But yeah, interesting. On to my pick, number 9.
Yep.
Let me cross Terrell Owens. Number 9, okay, Tony G. Tony Gonzalez, my number 9. Played mostly for the Kansas City Chiefs, then for the Atlanta Falcons a little bit in his career. I'm going to pull up my notes on him. But Tony Gonzalez, he was my number 6. I think he's the best tight end of all time. I get the debate for Gronk, but I think Tony Gonzalez, what he did over a long period of time, way surpasses Gronk. We'll get to Gronk. Gronk is one of the most talented NFL players to ever play. He's the most talented NFL tight end of all time. But Tony Gonzalez, people forget, he was also very insanely talented in his own right. He was a good run blocker to go along with his insane receiving ability. Wasn't quite the blocker Gronk was, but he was still a very good, willing run blocker who put up some good actual run blocking numbers in the PFF era, which was only when he was in his 30s. That wasn't back in his 20s. PFF wasn't around then. So who knows? Maybe he had better numbers early in his career, but all-time receiving leader for tight ends in yards and I believe touchdowns. Have to fact check touchdowns though.
No, not
6 times.
not touchdowns.
Not touchdowns. Gates passed him or
Yes,
something?
I think so.
Okay. But all-time tight end yards most. Travis Kelce could pass that down the line, but ranking right now, the most yards, 6 times first team All-Pro. Very interesting stat for me is he made a first team All-Pro in 3 different decades, the 1990s, the 2000s, and the 2010s late in his career. So that's impressive to see. What also stands out too is the 14 Pro Bowls. That is insanely impressive, making the Pro Bowl 14 times. And he deserved it pretty much all of those years. Looking at his stats right now, he had over 600 receiving yards in 16 straight seasons. And only 2 of those he was under 700. So anyway, just the ability to be consistent year in, year out for an entire career span. He didn't play with the best quarterbacks. Played with Trent Green for most of his time in Kansas City. Matt Ryan's a pretty good quarterback, but he was young at the time, and Tony G really helped with his development. So I just think the career span, the dominance for being that good that long, and having all those All-Pros, I just think you have to rank him as one of the best skill players of all time. And combining one of the best receiving tight ends of all time, and he's also a very good blocker too. So he has the talent, has the accolades, has the longevity, really has everything you want to see. So yeah, he's my number 6 all time, and he comes in at our number 9. Do you want to add anything?
I just do want to add that he is number 3 all time in receptions by just any player.
Any player? Wow,
Yeah.
I did not know that.
He played for a long time.
Where'd you guys have him ranked?
I
had him at 13.
15.
Oh wow, so we were quite different on this one.
Yeah.
What made him down? Was it like anything specific about him, or just the talent of the other guys?
I think honestly, for me, if you compare him to Rob Gronkowski, who I think is the only other tight end in football history that compares against Tony Gonzalez, is that Rob has more playoff success, more clutch moments, and I think overall has better hands than Tony Gonzalez, I would say. But I think Tony Gonzalez is a lot more athletic than Rob, which is like the one thing that I think is like, that kind of like gives Tony Gonzalez a fighting chance against Rob Gronkowski.
Interesting. I'm a little bit of the opposite of those. I think that Gronk is the most talented tight end of all time. But anyway, a little bit different on that one. But yeah, anything else to add?
Nope.
I was gonna say something, but I forgot what I was gonna say about Tony G. But we can move on to number, what are we at now? 10. All right, this is whose pick?
My pick.
Grant.
Graham.
And I'm going to
Who's
take
number
the other tight end, Rob Gronkowski.
Dang it.
Sorry, John.
Oh, it'll be a good comparison because I was gonna say one more thing. Tony G, well, Gronk is so impressive. I think Gronk's playoff performances were amazing, but I think Tony G to be able to what he did with different quarterbacks, Gronk having one of the best coaches and the best quarterback of all time, I think helped him a little bit. But he's still the most talented tight end ever played. But anyway, go on.
See, I think personally, Rob Gronkowski isn't the most, but it's super close between those two. But I don't know. I love watching Tony Gonzalez play. It might be because I was like 5 and 6 years old watching Tony Gonzalez play the end of his career when he's playing us twice a year against the Saints. And it's just like, who is this old guy? He's so good. But we're talking about Gronk now. Watching Gronk is hilarious. How big, stocky, watching him catch the football and then him fumble his way down the field is just mesmerizing. When he was having his little feud with the best tight end in football with Jimmy Graham, and me being, me being the typical Saints fan, and of course being named Graham, I would always say Jimmy Graham, Jimmy Graham. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, what?
I didn't know they had a feud.
They did. There was a very big debate about them being the two best tight ends in football. But anyways, Rob Gronkowski obviously was the best in football, and when he was playing until he joined the Bucs, he was arguably the best tight end in football since he stepped foot on the field. I think personally, maybe not his rookie year, but his second through pretty much the end of his career, he always had a case for it. Whether that's him being a top tier run blocker or a great stretch the field type of guy across the middle, he's always a surefire. Yes, he had Tom Brady throwing him the ball, but he also just was really good at putting himself in the right position.
Okay, John. Actually, I'll talk about Gronk, and then John, you'll finish.
Okay.
You're the Patriots fan. I have him at number 10, so right where I had him, my number 2 tight end of all time. I think we can say he has the best tight end season of all time, the 2011 season. Travis Kelce's 2020 season maybe rivaled it, but I think that was the best season because what he did with the 17 touchdowns. What he did with the touchdown catch, unbelievable. Over 10 touchdowns in 5 of his first 6 career seasons. Just compared to the games he played, he was very impressive with the touchdown catch. But again, most talented tight end of all time, in my opinion. You look at the run after catch ability, that being that big, that strong, being able to block, being able to have one of the biggest catch radiuses in all of football, contested catch ability, and being able to run after the catch the way he did with his size, unbelievable. He transformed the game as far as a downfield tight end. Just his career yards per reception was 15.0. So that's a pretty big number. That shows you can get down the field and make plays. The clutch playoff performances after clutch playoff performances, very impressive from Gronk. So I think his talent is there. Why is he only number 10 and my number 2 tight end of all time? I think it's because you have to look at really availability matters, and he played more than 14 games in a season. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of his seasons in the NFL, 11 years. So that matters to me, being able to finish the season. And I think if he was able to stay healthy more consistently and maybe play a little bit longer than he did, he could have been one of the maybe 5 or 6 best guys on this list and the best tight end of all time. Because, like I said, I think he's one of the most talented football players to ever step into the league. So anyway, that's my spiel on Gronk. Still at number 10, just because the talent's unbelievable. But John, I'll let you finish up on him.
Just to say something, he's just a matchup nightmare. Because if you would line up a tight end against him, he's quicker. But if you line up a safety against him, he's stronger. So he just had the ability with Brady to take over a game. Just watching them march down the field without being able to be stopped was so fun. And he's just such a fun player to watch. My personal favorite player of all time. And just his ability to have fun on and off the field is amazing to see.
Yeah.
John, I'm gonna need to get that Gronk jersey. That's one of my things that I want to, or jerseys I want to add to the collection. But anyway, whose pick is it now? I
John's.
picked Tony
It's my
G.
pick.
Okay. Who's at 11, John?
Marshall Falk, my number 11
Nice.
pick. He was personally 9 on my list, and he's just the best receiving running back of all time, in my opinion. As well as, I believe he won 3 straight Offensive Player of the Years at one point.
Yep.
Which is just amazing. And he had the rushing ability too. 12,000 rushing yards, 100 touchdowns, 4.3 yards per attempt, as well as adding on an MVP. And I just think his ability to receive out of the backfield is the best ever. And the duality of that threat, he's my personal number 5 running back of all time and was number 9 on my list.
Graham?
I had Marshall Falk also at 9.
Okay, interesting. I have Marshall Falk as I think my running back 11 or something, but he was 17 on my list. Why are you looking at me like that?
Wow.
Okay. Very good all-time player. I have him at number 17. I don't hate having him this high.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, 19,000 career yards, very high. 136 touchdowns, very high. One-time champion, 3-time first-team All-Pro, one-time MVP, 3-time Offensive Player of the Year. Like you said, the talent, I don't think the rushing talent was absolutely out of this world comparing him to other talents who have other rushing talents. And I think the peak seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 seasons over 1,000 rushing yards. Okay, that's solid for all-time player. But I think he had those 3 really, really dominant years: 1999 to 2001, where he was 3 straight Offensive Player of the Years, first team All Pros, and that's what gets him in the top 20 for me. But I think outside of that, his career wasn't the most consistent career we've ever seen. So that boosted him down a little bit to me. His last 1,000-yard rushing season was age 28 in 2001, where he won Offensive Player of the Year. So, yes, impressive peak, impressive dual threat ability. I just don't think the rushing talent was top end. 4.3 yards a carry, solid, good, but not all time. So, yeah, I just think there's a few other running backs I prefer over him. That's why I had him at number 17. But number 11 on this list, I'm not going to complain because the peak was as good as almost any player we've seen. But, yeah, so I had him at number 11. And whose pick is it now, Graham?
It's your pick.
Your pick, Nick.
Oh, my pick?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We're going to go with my running back 5, also played for the Los Angeles Rams. I had this guy at number 9 on my list of offensive skill players, Eric Dickerson. For Eric Dickerson, what stands out with him is the insane season he had. I'm going to pull up the stats real quick, but he has the most rushing yards in the season in NFL history. It was 2,105. In 1984, when they played 16 games. But yeah, second MVP that year. He never won an MVP. That's my only knock on him. He never won an MVP, but you just see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 years, he averaged over 100 yards a carry. Oh, not a carry, a game.
That would be crazy.
Over 100 yards a game. That was insane. Again, the peak was very high. Another, I guess, a knock on him that I had with Falk is the longevity really wasn't there. But yeah, that peak was just insanely high. And what stands out with him is he's one of the most talented running backs, I think, like runners of the ball. Elite speed and size. He was tall. He was like I think a 6'3", 6'4" running back. I'm going to look that up real quick. But his speed for his size was very impressive. So, yeah, just very talented player. Never won MVP. That's my knock on him. But I think he had a very good career, very high peak. 5-time first team All Pro, like I mentioned. And he was 6'3", so 6'3" running back with his speed was impressive. So I think he's very talented, tough running back. And I think he had an impact on some of these 90s and 2000s running backs. So, yeah, I think he had a big impact on the NFL too. So I have him at number, 12.
Wow, interesting. I did not have him that high.
Would you have him?
20.
I had him 14, so not too far.
Not too far off for you.
Well, that's funny. We had back-to-back Rams running backs.
And guess what? We're going to add another running back to the list. with my
I don't blame
sixth best running back of all time, Adrian Peterson.
I have him at number 7 running back all time too, and I have him at number 12. We're at 13, so I had him one spot higher than this. But
Yeah, I honestly think Adrian Peterson is, in my opinion, would you say he's the best running back of our childhood?
Yeah,
Yeah,
not even close.
Like,
definitely.
not
Yeah.
even close, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, watching him play for the Minnesota Vikings and watching him pretty much carry a old raggedy should be retired Brett Favre to an NFC Championship game was absolutely remarkable. I mean, the guy had, if you really look at it, like 15,000 rushing yards, 120 touchdowns. The 2012 MVP. He was this close from breaking the all-time single-season rushing record. He was a 4-time All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler. I mean, the guy played in nearly 200 games for a running back. That's pretty good. The only thing you could like possibly take away from Adrian Peterson is the injuries. He did go through a lot of injuries in his career, especially towards the end. But honestly, the playmaking, the just the fact how he was just built and how he built himself to play football was honestly just mesmerizing, and it was so much fun to watch him as a kid.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson. You said he was so close to breaking the all-time single-season rushing record. He was actually 8
8
yards
yards away. Yeah.
Oh,
8 yards away from tying Eric Dickerson. Listen, I had him at number 6 all-time running back, number 12 all-time skill player. So I'm right here with you, having him as a very high-ranked player. What stands out is from 2007 to 2015, 2014 he was injured, so take away that year. But all those years I named, over 10 touchdowns, lots of yards, receiving ability too. He had a 400-yard receiving season, so he was pretty solid receiver too. But yeah, 2015 his age 30 season, he was first team All Pro with almost 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. 2016 he was injured, and then that was his last year on the Vikings, and his career just kind of went downhill from there. Although he did still manage to get 1,000 yards with the Washington Redskins in 2018, so impressive. The longevity stands out. I think if he never was injured in 2016, we could be talking about him top 10 on this list. He was that good as a player. And anything else I had on my notes? Just great all around runner from his first career touch. His first career game, he had a big run. He was just knew he was going to be good from the start. 4.6 yards per attempt. That's up there with the tops in NFL history for a guy who played as long as he did. And to win an MVP in an era where running backs were starting to lose value was very impressive. So, yeah, very impressive career. I have him at number 12, and he comes in at our list at number 13.
there's a reason why he's called All Day, Mr. All Day.
Yep. All right.
John.
My pick.
Wait, no.
Yes, it's
John's
John's pick.
All right. I'm going to go with another running back, LaDainian Tomlinson.
Oh,
I'm on a spree of picking 2000s players.
So he was another dual threat running back, and one thing that stands out to me in particular is the touchdown ability. His first 9 years in the NFL, he had 10 or more touchdowns in each year, and the one season where he had 28 touchdowns, I think that's the most of any skill player for any single season.
Yeah, it might be.
I think it is.
Yeah, and he also had 1,800 yards to go on with that. I think that is one of the best MVP seasons of all time by a non-quarterback. So, and the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, which is why I have him at number 11 on my list and my number 6 running back of all time.
Graham.
I did not have him that high, and it's because I think everybody is just so close. I had him at 28 because in my eyes, yeah,
Wow.
like the guy was all that, the insane speed, the great receiving, but I don't think he did it long enough, and he kind of like the same issue that we said with Marshall Falk. I just think that not having the 3 straight seasons of being like the best running back in football and being the best offensive player in football. It's really just one season, in my opinion, where he's the best. Kind of like degrades, puts him down a little bit. Kind of the same reason why I don't have Eric Dickerson that high, because it's just one season of the best football,
Yeah.
the best football in the NFL. So I actually have him at 28, but I don't necessarily hate the pick at 14. I just think maybe there's about 14 other guys that may have a little bit of a better say,
Okay, LaDainian Tomlinson, the 162 career touchdowns is insanely high. I had him at number 14, so I'm kind of right here with you, John. Looking at the peak season, like you said, 2006, one of the best seasons we'll ever see out of any player. Combining the rushing and receiving ability over 2,300 scrimmage yards, which he also did in 2003, over 2,300 scrimmage yards. We had 725 receiving yards that year, 100 receptions for a running back, very high.
It's the Drew Brees effect.
I think the consistency of I think I didn't realize what he was saying until John started laughing. I think the consistency from 2001 to 2008 of having over 1,100 yards in all those years and having really over 1,300 yards from 2002 to 2007, 6 straight years, will putting absurdly high touchdown numbers is what put him over Falk for me. But just a few spots, he's my number 8 running back of all time. So Falk was my number 10 running back of all time, by the way. LaDainian Thompson, my number 8 running back of all time, right behind Adrian Peterson. Just wish he would have done it a little bit longer to get him maybe over Peterson, but incredible talent, patience as a runner, and ability to find open gaps. Kind of like prime Le'Veon Bell's patience, except I think LT, obviously the better all-time player by far. But yeah, I really like what I saw whenever I watched him, and yeah, very impressive player. So I have him at number 14. John has him at number 14, same with me. And interesting, is it my pick again?
Yes.
I'm about to make it a running back spree.
It's 5 in a row.
Number 15. I did not expect me to take 2 Baylors in this one, but Gale Sayers. Would you guys have him ranked just so I get a little bit of a grasp?
17.
Okay. Would you have him ranked? Please say you ranked it.
In A.
You did not rank Gale Sayers as a top 32 skill position player of all time.
I did not.
Bro, what? Okay, Gale Sayers. If he didn't get hurt, we're gonna just throw out a what if you. He may have been number 1 on this list. Maybe number 1's a stretch, but he would have been top 5 on this list, no doubt, with the Jim Brown, Jerry Rice. Going into the league, yes, there were players before his time who did multiple things on the field because there was a lot of guys who played both ways. Gale didn't do that, but I'm about to talk about something else. From a kick returning standpoint, a rushing standpoint, a receiving standpoint, there was no player like him in his time. Only had 6,000 career rushing yards because he only played like 60 career games. But in those seasons, 5-time first-team All-Pro. Every season he was healthy, he was a first-team All-Pro. Only 5 seasons. Led the league in rushing twice. His rookie season was phenomenal with his rushing and receiving and returning ability. Finished top 5 in MVP voting in his first 4 seasons in the league. They didn't have an offensive player of the year at his time when he played. But, yeah, led the league in all-purpose return yards 3 times. So, like I said, from a returner, a rusher, and a receiver, we haven't seen anyone like him in his time. And maybe never since, because he was very elusive. You just watch his highlights. He's running just through defenders, cutting around them in the mud. His elusiveness in the conditions he played in, insane. And he also had power to his game, too. The 5.0 yards per attempt is up there with Jim Brown, Barry Sanders, like we mentioned. Just the talent. Amazing stop and start ability. One of the best kick returns of all time. Just we've hardly seen a player as talented as Gale Sayers, so it's hard for me to rank him super low because his accolades are amazing too. Because 5 All-Pros is still as good as almost any running back to ever play, and he did that in 5 seasons healthy. So you factor in the talent, the accolades. He did lead the league in rushing categories a few times when he played. So I just think you have to rank him high. I had him at number 11, but he comes in here at number 15. Anything y'all want to add?
I do understand not having him due to him only playing 5 seasons.
But we
the
just
greatness
named
is
Patrick
there.
Mahomes as a
That's
top
just-
10 quarterback of all time.
Yeah, but that's also this is also the same reason why I don't have Jim Thorpe ranked in the top 32. Like
Jim Thorpe's not ranked because he played in 1920 and he made one first team All Pro in 1923 and he doesn't have stats.
I guarantee you have him ranked too, don't you? You have Jim Thorpe
I
ranked.
don't.
You don't?
I don't have.
Oh, okay. Thank God. I'm not the only one. But like,
Okay.
I just don't think they played long enough, and especially
Okay,
in an era where like it's just like iffy. Like that's a big what if to say if he played more than let's say 7 seasons.
The reason why I don't have 1920s players ranked is because they didn't have stats. Like some websites you can find the rushing touchdowns, but you can't find like
The
anything
yards,
else.
yeah.
So like for me to consider the 20s players, I have to watch a documentary on them in black and white and see how talented they were, and see people talk about them and hype them up. And then they'd have to make like 7 first team All Pros or something ridiculous for me to even consider them. But there was no 20s skill position players like that.
I will say Jim
Very-
Thorpe in the baseball ranking would be pretty high though.
I thought he didn't play. Athlete ranking is the best athlete of all time.
I agree by far.
I agree,
Jim
yeah.
Thorpe?
Eh,
Did you know Jim Thorpe hit a home run in 3 different states in one game? There was a stadium on the border of like
Are you kidding me?
yeah. That's an
Arkansas,
actual
Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And he hit a home run over left field, center field, right field. And yeah, anyway, Jackson Coco told me that. Shout out Jackson Coco if you're watching this. But yeah, we might need to make a Jim Thorpe video or a podcast one time.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Best athletes of all time.
but anyway, on to
It's my
the next pick. Who's pick, Graham? Okay.
Ooh, here we go. With the 16th pick, we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to get a wide receiver off the board. And we're going with Calvin Johnson.
Oh, I thought you were gonna have a different one.
I had Calvin Johnson as the 11th best player. He falls to 16 for me. I mean, 6 Pro Bowls in 9 seasons. That is a crazy percentage. 83 receiving touchdowns, not really comparable to your top guys. 11,000 or nearly 12,000 receiving yards. Also, isn't comparable to the top guys. 731 receptions. Again, like he just doesn't have the seasons to compete with a guy like a Randy Moss, Jerry Rice. But the talent competes with those guys most definitely. I would say he's probably more talented than Randy Moss, and maybe it's a debatable with Jerry Rice. But I mean, the guy absolutely was a tank. I mean, 2012 season, freaking played in all 16 games. 122 receiving yard or 122 receptions, 1,900 receiving yards, only 5 touchdowns. It's a little low, but then again, like also like we if that had like a 10 plus receiving yard touchdown season, that season would be absolutely ridiculous. 1,600.
Still doesn't compare to crazy like host 1951.
Okay, but also like you look at the season before that, 96 receptions, 1,600 receiving yards, 16 touchdowns, and even the year after it, 1,400 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns. But if you look at the average yards per catch throughout his whole season, it's absolutely ridiculous. He didn't have a 1,000-yard reception like season. And only 2 out of his 7 seasons, or 2 out of his 9 seasons. That's ridiculous.
1,000 receiving. Yeah. Okay. Ridiculous statistically. 3 first team All Pros. Accolades are pretty good for the time he played. Led the league in receiving yards twice, touchdowns once, receptions once. It's weird because he had that historic 2012 season, but the season before he had 16 touchdowns. So, like, and 1,600 yards. So 2011 was historic too.
And so was 2013, if you want to throw that in there too.
He didn't have quite the touchdowns that 2012 year. It's gonna sound like I'm hating on Calvin Johnson. I had him 22, so pretty high as well.
I had him.
Wow. I don't get when people say that Calvin Johnson is this ultra generational receiving talent.
Have you seen the picture of him getting lined
Oh,
up against two
hold up.
corners?
Graham, we're in the same show.
We are. Gridiron
We
Heights.
need to get John
I don't have the
white
white
shirt.
one.
He has the black one. I need to get you that, John. But anyway, back to Calvin Johnson. Watching his highlights, the most ridiculous contested catch receiver we've ever seen. You just throw it 2-3 guys on him, doesn't matter, he's catching the ball. That's what was absolutely ridiculous about his game. But the speed was phenomenal too. As far as what he provides elsewise, he's not Julio Jones talent-wise. I think he had a slightly better career than Julio Jones, but you run after the catch wasn't like a Julio Jones. The route running wasn't like a Justin Jefferson or some other. His route running and his run after catch didn't make him a Randy Moss type talent or a Julio Jones or even a Justin Jefferson type talent, in my opinion. I think he just had a phenomenal highlight reel with his contested catch abilities, but I don't think the all-around receiving game was quite the others or quite like others to make him this generational talent. Now, he's very, very talented, one of the top 10 receiver talents, but I don't think he's a top 5 generational receiving talent. Personally, in my opinion, I think Larry Fitzgerald is a more all-around talented receiver than Calvin Johnson. Some may strongly disagree with that, but when we get to Fitz, we'll talk about him. But yeah, I had Calvin Johnson 22. Amazing career, what he did with the Lions, with those consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. His stats in a short period of time were phenomenal. The contested catch ability, the downfield ability, all phenomenal. And to be the best at something, the best all time at something like he was with the jump ball, that really stands out. So great player, number 6 receiver of all time, in my opinion. I had him at number 22 for skill position.
There's no other NFL picture that has been taken like the Calvin Johnson picture where he has two Saints cornerbacks lined up against him in the red zone. Like, that is an all-time photo. Like, that goes
You
to
haven't seen
how
that?
great he was. You haven't
What
seen.
picture are you talking about?
Look it up. It's
He has what? Oh, the two guys defending him.
Lining up on him on the scrimmage.
I remember.
Okay, I have something to say. Yes, I've seen that picture, and that is phenomenal. But back in the 1930s and 40s, they didn't have the good footage, and we don't have all the. We have footage, but we don't have all the nice 4K colored pictures of Don Hudson being double and triple team. And I mean it when I say this man was double and triple team. Look at some of his biographies. They stated, I'm going to trust my sources. They had never seen anything like it because it was such a run-heavy era, and he just bullied your defense, being one of the fastest men in the world with amazing route running. You had to double and triple team the Alabama Antelope, Don Hudson. That's why he's number 3 on this list. But anyway, back to you, Graham.
Yeah, Nick, you contradict yourself a lot. It's so funny.
What I contradict myself with?
You just talked about how 20s, like 1910s and 20s players are like people who you can't like necessarily rank that high because of the lack of footage. And then you talk about like an early 30s player and talk about all the footage you've seen.
No, you twisted up. 1910s, there wasn't NFL football, so I don't know where you got the 10s from. The 20s, I said there wasn't stats. The 30s and 40s, when Don Hudson played, there was stats, and he led the league in almost all of them every single year. The 20s, there wasn't stats, so I said you have to have a ridiculous all-pro number, because if there's no footage and stats, how do I know you're good unless you made all-pro like every year of your career?
But you're trying to...
Don Hudson, there was stats. He led the league almost every year. There was all-pros. He made 8 all-pros for his team. He won 2 MVPs. They didn't have an MVP in the 20s. And they had some footage on Don Hudson, and the footage you see is him burning past your defense. So there you go. The 20s, you didn't really have footage or stats, so how can I rank you high unless you made first-team all-pro like every year of your career? There you go. I just roasted your argument. Bro, how are we almost an hour in and we're only halfway through the pod? We need to speed up.
We just
I thought this one would be shorter than quarterbacks, but this one's fun.
Think so. I think this one is so much more like talkable and like debatable, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I had told John we're gonna have so much more different than we did quarterbacks because we're comparing 3 positions.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, on to whoever's
John.
My pick. I'm going with. I think you mentioned him earlier, Larry Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Wow. Nice
Number
pick.
17 overall. He was 16 on mine. I just think he's one of the most consistent wide receivers. While maybe he was not the best, He was always there and had some of the best hands in the game. And looking at just the counting stats, 1,400 receptions, 17,500 yards, 120 touchdowns. And I also want to add that he was a great playoff performer. Even though he never won a Super Bowl, he averaged 100 yards per game in the
Yep.
playoffs.
Insane.
And that game against the Packers, I think, he just completely took over.
Which one, 2015 or
The one-
2009? He took over every time they played the Packers.
I was just remembering the one when Aaron Rodgers threw
The
that
divisional? Yeah,
threw that Hail
2015.
Mary. and then-
2015, the 2 Hail
Favorite
Marys.
football game I've ever
Yeah.
watched.
I
watching
agree.
Packers
So agree.
Fitzgerald.
Best game of all time, in my opinion.
Facts. 1958. What?
No.
We're gonna talk about the '58 championship game later when we get to some Colts player.
All right.
But anyway, Fitzgerald, number 4 for me. Receivers, again, I just couldn't rank him ahead of some of the running backs, so he falls number 20 all time for me. But getting to Fitzgerald, okay, the big knock on him was maybe he was never the best receiver consistently. Like he wasn't the top receiver year after year, like maybe a Calvin or Julio. I disagree with that. He had one first team All Pro, but looking at his career, how in the world did he not get at least second team All Pro? He didn't even make second team All Pro in 2005 when he was clearly the second best receiver in football behind Steve Smith that year. He had a year in, I think, 07, 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns. Did not even make second team All Pro. He had another first team All Pro year case that year. 2010, he had a second team All Pro case and he didn't make it. So there was year after year where he had strong cases for All Pro and couldn't even make second team. So that's kind of questionable. I think some of that has to do with the team he played for. What he did year after year, being consistent, having really over 700 yards for 15 straight seasons. He had over 1,700 yards. It was 700 yards. Most of those seasons having over 1,000 yards. Ridiculous with the inconsistent quarterback play. Kurt Warner and Carson Palmer were his best quarterbacks, but most years of his career, he had a very mediocre quarterback. But yeah, I just think he needs to be talked about as one of the better talents too, because he has the best playoff run, indisputable. 2008 was the best playoff run we've ever seen from a receiver, better than Jerry Rice's 1988. 136.5 yards per game, 7 touchdowns in 4 games. Single-handedly almost took one of the worst playoff teams that they're ever going into the playoffs to a Super Bowl championship. But as far as the talent goes, some of the best hands, maybe the best hands in NFL history. I'm sure you've heard the stat everyone's heard, more tackles than drops in his career.
Yep. Crazy.
His ability to become a blocker later in his career after that 2013-ish, where he moved to slot receiver, very good blocker too. You factor in his jump ball ability and route running is also phenomenal. I think he's one of the more complete receivers of all time. So I think that has to stand out too. So just a phenomenal player. And by the way, I said 15 straight seasons with over 1,700 yards or 700 yards. It was 16 straight seasons up until his last year. He had over 700 yards. So yeah, phenomenal player. Like the Red King. Okay. We can move on to the next one, and it's Graham's pick.
I think it's your pick.
It's your pick, John. Or Nick.
Oh, why do I not know who's picking every time?
You're
Me
every
and John
3.
got you. You're every 3.
Okay, this one may be surprising. I don't think Graham's gonna know who it is. I'm just taking a shot at Graham. Lenny Moore.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, phenomenal player. Had him at number 13 on my list, so would have had him a lot higher than this. Than he went. Played with a stacked Baltimore Colts team back in the 50s and 60s. What stands out is the 111 career touchdowns. That's absolutely phenomenal. And the talent, like I said, I think he was similar to Gale Sayers before Gale Sayers as far as being an elite rusher, receiver, and returner. I just don't think it was quite to the ability of Sayers. That's why he's ranked a little bit lower for me. But talk about a guy who had 3 seasons over 7 yards a carry, career average of 4.8. He wasn't the most high volume rusher, but that's because he was an electric receiver. 6 seasons over 1,000 scrimmage yards, which, but back in the day, the stacked offense he had, Johnny U, John Mackey, Raymond Bailey stands out. Finished third in MVP voting twice. There was an offensive player of the year back in his day. He probably would have won at least one. But yeah, the combined rushing and receiving ability, the 111 career touchdowns, very fast and elusive player. One of the ultimate big play threats. Like I said, high rushing yards per attempt and receiving yards per reception, 16.6. Whenever you said Bailey Sanders may have started the receiving game for running backs, it's Lenny Moore back in the 50s. Just what he did as a receiver and a runner, phenomenal player. And going back to his big playability, he has 26 career touchdowns of over 50 yards. That's the most in NFL history. At least among running backs, it might still be among receivers unless Tyreek Hill broke it. But yeah, phenomenal player.
Okay.
Anything?
Where'd you have him ranked, John?
I didn't have him ranked initially. I didn't have time to slide him in, but
Neither
I
did
think
I.
he would have been ranked. I think I just never slid him in.
Okay, so
I had him
I covered y'all.
I had him at like 32 at first, and then I found like 3 more guys that I put him above him.
Okay, he was my number 9 running back of all time, so a little bit different opinions on him. But anyway, on to the next one. Speed it up a little bit, Graham.
Ooh, I don't know if we're gonna speed up on this pick. This pick is gonna make me mad.
Okay.
But yeah, the 9th pick, we're going with another running back. We're going with Terrell Davis.
Wow. Talk about you can't rank Gale Sayers, but gonna go ahead and rank Terrell Davis.
Now, the ultimate first 5 seasons of Terrell Davis is honestly impressive. You don't want to look at his last back half because, he got hurt a lot and was not nearly as good. But let me tell you, this guy might secretly be the best playoff running back of all time. Listen to these championship games. AFC Championship 1997. 26 times carried the ball, 139 yards. They won that game. 1998 AFC Championship game. Also carried the ball 32 times, 167 yards. Crazy. Also won that game. Super Bowl, what is this? The one he played the Packers. 30 times, 157 yards, Super Bowl MVP. Honestly, excluding John Elway's ridiculous helicopter first down, crazy run, he might single-handedly carry that team to a Super Bowl. The other Super Bowl against the Falcons, carried 25 times, 102 yards. Not nearly as impressive, but when it mattered most, main man Terrell Davis was there. Those first 5 seasons he played were honestly ridiculous.
He didn't play 5 seasons healthy. He played 4 seasons healthy, less than Gale Sayers. Made 3 first-team All-Pros. Gale Sayers made 5.
4.
He wasn't the receiver of Gale Sayers.
Oh my God.
He wasn't the kick returner of Gale Sayers. He wasn't the talent of Gale Sayers. Yet you're going to rank Terrell Davis and not Gale Sayers.
Okay.
But anyway, go on.
4 seasons. I misread. But, you look at the stats. 1,100 yards rookie season, pretty good. 1,600 yards pretty much second season. 1,800 yards pretty much the next season, and 2,000 yards his 4th and final healthy season. Honestly, is ridiculous. I would say in 1998 he had a strong case to win MVP that year. That's just me, but
he did win MVP.
Did he win MVP that year, or did he win? I thought he won.
I think so. I think he did.
He win MVP?
Yeah, he won MVP.
Okay, that's right. Where does it say it on there? It doesn't say it on the stat thing.
Yeah,
yeah, it does. I see it right here. I thought that said Super Bowl MVP. I'm stupid.
He did both.
He was. I know. That's why I didn't see it. It didn't say. I thought it said Super Bowl MVP. It said Super Bowl and NFL MVP. Also was the all decades running back for the 1990s. That's a pretty significant stat. For only 4 record really good seasons, he beat running backs like Emmitt Smith to be on the all decades team, which to my eyes is ridiculously impressive.
Multiple running backs made the all decades team. Didn't Emmitt make it too?
Yeah, but I think he was ranked first out of the 2. He was RB1.
Oh, let me look that up. Bailey Sanders and Emmitt Smith were first team, and then Thurman Thomas and Terrell Davis.
Was he second team? Okay, I thought he was first team, and Emmitt Smith was second team, which wouldn't make sense.
No, but anyway, so Terrell Davis, he didn't make my list. He's probably in the top 45 for me, but I couldn't rank him this high. Yes, you look at 4 seasons, but talent-wise, not like a Gale Sayers, not even close. Personally, watching him play, he was a 6th-round pick. So you don't expect the talent to be crazy, and I don't think his film showed crazy talent or anything. watching his film, played for a phenomenal offensive line. Not going to take away Terrell Davis, but it's like kind of like the Niners, how they kind of like the Niners. You put any running back in, they're going to rush for 1,000 yards. That's kind of the extent it was. Obviously, Terrell Davis rushing for 2,000 yards 1 year has to be very good, which he is. But again, 4 seasons, 3 really good seasons, 2 offensive player of the years, impressive accolades. I just don't think the talent really is anywhere close to a Gill Sayers or any other running back who played a short span of time. That's why I couldn't rank him, but I get it.
I think the
But
playoff success, honestly, is
yeah, the
just
playoffs
ridiculous.
is the only thing that makes me think I'm could
Yeah,
maybe rank him. but
143 yards per game in the playoffs.
Is ridiculous. I mean, I think personally he's the best running back of all time in postseason history.
I mean, I can't argue that. But anyway, yeah. Did you ever rank John?
I had him 31, so I did rank him.
Nice.
Okay, so I was the only one who didn't rank him. But anyway, on to number 20, John. Who you have?
Another running back who had trouble staying healthy, Earl Campbell.
Yes.
Like the pick.
His first 3 seasons in the league are crazy. Over 1,400 rushing yards in all 3 of those seasons. 3 straight Offensive Player of the Years and an MVP in one of those seasons. And what was it? Yeah, 3-time All-Pro, 3-time Offensive Player of the Year, 74 touchdowns, 9,000 yards, and he's just another one of these guys on the list that had trouble staying healthy.
Yeah, Earl Campbell, phenomenal player, like you mentioned. Really one of the best power runners of all time. Huge lower half, and just very strong, powerful runner. So I like him a lot. The 3 straight offensive player of the year stands out. Aggressive running style. Again, it was just a very short span, even shorter than a Marshall Faulk, and he was not much of a receiver. So I actually had him one spot behind Faulk at number 18 and my 11th running back of all time. Would you have him ranked, John?
I had him 18.
Okay, so we both have him 18. How about you, Graham?
I had him at 15.
Oh, wow. Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about him then?
He's just really fun to watch. If he stayed healthy longer, I think he'd probably be in that conversation with the Barry Sanders, with the Emmitt Smiths, in my opinion. I think if he just stayed healthy and had a better situation, I think as well. I think playing for the Oilers at that time was not necessarily like a good thing.
Okay, so this guy that I'm about to pick, I'm honestly very surprised that he hasn't been picked yet. He's a current player, and I had him at number 15, so I thought he'd be picked by now. Travis Kelce.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
Travis Kelce comes in at number 21. He was my number 15 player. I think we can comfortably say he's in the big 3 all-time tight end. Maybe not quite the Gonzalez or Gronk level, but he's definitely a step ahead of number 4 in my opinion. Just one of the best receiving threats at the tight end position of all time. Over 10,000 receiving yards, and he still probably has a good 3, 4, maybe even longer than that years left in him. How many first team All Pros has he made at this point? Let me check.
4.
Okay, 4 first team All Pros. His 2020 season, I personally think he should have won Offensive Player of the Year. He finished 4th in the voting. They usually don't give Offensive Player of the Years to tight ends, but he had the most receiving yards for a tight end in NFL history that year, an astonishing 94.4 yards a game, 11 touchdowns. I wouldn't say he pops off the screen athletically like some other tight ends in NFL history, including Gonzalez and Gronk and some other guys we might get to if they make the list. But just the consistency year to year to put up 1,000 yards for 7 straight years, the most for a tight end in NFL history. To have NFL records for a tight end, just very impressive for Travis Kelce. Another interesting stat is he is currently 2nd all-time in career receiving yards in the postseason, only behind Jerry Rice.
Mm-hmm.
He recently passed, I think, Julian Edelman. But yeah, ups his game in the playoffs. His yards per game in the playoffs is 86. Regular season 71.8. So he's one of those rare players who even improves in the playoffs, and he has 2 rings to show for it. So I think he falls in good at number 15, but a little low on our overall list at number 21.
All right. I think it's my turn again.
Yep.
Wait, what did you guys have Kelsey ranked?
I had him
20
at 19.
Item 24.
Wow. Okay, so under 22, Graham, who's 22.
Another pick. I don't know if you're necessarily going to be happy with me, Nick. I'm going with another Vikings receiver. Me stacking up these Vikings receiver. Chris Carter.
Wow.
16 seasons, granted. 4 of those seasons, those first couple seasons with Philadelphia, 3 seasons, and his last season with Miami aren't necessarily spectacular. But if you look at the run that he had with Minnesota when he first started getting good, he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 straight seasons of over 1,000 yards receiving. The dude was a touchdown machine. 130 touchdowns in a receiving career, pretty great. 16 seasons, so he had the longevity and nearly 14,000 receiving yards. In my eyes, one of the best wide receiver stats of all time. He kind of reminds me of like what Larry Fitzgerald is for our generation.
I was
from
going
our
to say that
parents'
too.
generation. Like the guy just was on the field. The guy just caught the football. His drops were not as high as you would think for a receiver in the 90s when you had cornerbacks like Deion Sanders going up against you. I mean, the guy set the NFL record at the time for receptions in a season, which was 122. That was later broken by
Marvin Harris.
I mean, man, Marvin Harris said that they broke it by Michael Thomas. I mean, the guy had 19, 20 records. It says 19 Vikings team records. That's crazy for a team record. That's like ridiculous. I mean, honestly, Larry Fitzgerald before Larry Fitzgerald was a player, I think he deserves to be on this list. I actually had him at number 18 of all time, right behind Larry Fitzgerald, actually. So me getting him at 22 is actually a really great.
Well, interesting. He was an honorable mention for me.
Oh, wow.
So
What?
I had him 23.
Okay, I did not expect you guys to have Chris Carter ranked. Honorable mention for me, I think he's around the what would that fall? I have him at receiver 13, I believe, 13 or 14. Yeah, all-time receiver 13 for me. Very good player, like you said, consistent. Don't think he had the crazy playoff performances of Fitzgerald, and while his longevity was good, it wasn't comparable to Fitzgerald quite. But I do think the Fitzgerald comparison is fair as far as there were maybe other more pop off your screen receivers that played in his era that maybe made his name less popular, but still a very good long career. Yeah, I just couldn't quite rank him over some of the guys. Looking at my 23 through 32, I can't justify having him over any of those guys in my opinion. So yeah.
All right. It is my pick, right?
On to John. Yep.
All right. This is going to be. I'm going with Marcus Allen.
Nice.
Marcus Allen.
I had him 24.
I have him 19, and I just looking. I just saw some. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11 times in his career he had over 1,000 scrimmage yards. One of the better receiving backs in history with 5,000 yards. A one-time MVP, only 2-time All-Pro, and he was a Super Bowl MVP. I think he has the accolades. Also, 123 rushing touchdowns. I think that between his rushing and receiving ability and the longevity, I have him at 19 on my list.
Yeah, I like Marcus Allen a lot. I had him at 24. I had him, I want to say 13 or 14 at running back. Very good. Actually, no, it might have been 15 at running back. I don't know. 13, 14, or 15, somewhere in that range. Very good. Consistent player for a long, long time. I think that late career span in Kansas City really helped him. But the reason why he's not super high is just because running backs in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I just feel like those guys like Earl Campbell winning 3 straight Offensive Player of the Years, guys who just had much higher peaks than Marcus Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Although what gets him still in the top 25 on my list is because, being super consistent in his career, one of the more complete running backs of all time with the rushing ability, the receiving ability, and he was actually a very good blocker for his time. He played some fullback too when the Raiders wanted him to switch over. I think having the offensive rookie of the year, the MVP, the accolades to go along with that really moves him up. And what's underrated about him is his playoff ability. 84.2 yards per game in the playoffs, 11 touchdowns, pretty good career playoff stats. So I think he put together a long, good, consistent career, and he won an MVP. So I think he has to be ranked. Where'd you have him, Graham?
I had him at 30.
Wow.
So
see, I just don't see how you can rank Terrell Davis above Marcus Allen. Because I think Marcus Allen was a more complete back than Terrell Davis too. He just had 3 insane statistical seasons, but he was also playing for the stacked O-line. I don't know. It just depends how highly you think of Terrell Davis's talent, really. But anyway, who are we on now? 24, and it's my pick.
Yep.
Okay.
Here we go.
No, it's not. I mean, as far as
the 1958 MVP. No.
Okay. This guy, you're gonna see his name, and I don't know what's gonna come up. As far as we're ranking football players, I'm shocked he hasn't been picked yet. I had him at number 16. OJ Simpson, amazing talent, really. Just one-time MVP, one-time for his team All-Pro. 4.7 yards per attempt career-wise, 5-time for his team All-Pro. The accolades are there. The rushing per attempts is there, 4.7 yards per attempt. Very elusive player, just an amazing talent in his time. He was also a very good receiver. That's what separates him and Earl Campbell, in my opinion, for the best running back of kind of that 70s era. I think Campbell was a little bit maybe later in the 70s. But yeah, 2 seasons with over 2,000 scrimmage yards. Finished top 4 in MVP voting for 4 straight seasons, including winning an MVP and an Offensive Player of the Year and 2 runner-up Offensive Player of the Years. That 5-year stretch, 1972 to 1976. Insane. Again, didn't have the super long, consistent career, and he only had 2 seasons over 10 rushing touchdowns. So the touchdowns were a little disappointing. But I think you factor in the peak, 5 straight first-team All-Pros, the rushing and receiving ability, the elusive ability, very talented overall player, and he has the MVP on top of it. So I think he should be ranked in the top 20. I have him at number 16. One knock on him, though, again, the touchdowns wasn't super high, and he fumbled a lot, and he didn't have a super long, career stat-wise. Kind of fell off after those 5 years. But yeah, any thoughts on OJ Simpson?
I have a question. Was he the first to have 2,000 yards in a season?
1973 was his. I think Dickerson was 1974, but I'll double check.
Oh, okay. So they were the same.
Eric Dickerson. No, Dickerson played in the 80s. It was 1984.
Yeah. Simpson was the first.
Yeah, but yeah, impressive career. Where'd you guys have him ranked?
I had him at 26, so not too far off.
25.
Okay,
yeah,
so
we're all right there.
I just had him much higher than y'all as far as I had him at 16, but 24 about in the range you had him.
Yep.
Okay, we can move on to Graham.
Yep. Ooh, with my pick, taking another one of those Broncos from the 90s, tight end, Shannon Sharp. What do you think of that, Nick?
Shannon Sharp. I ranked his brother, not him.
Really?
What? Right.
You ranked Sterling?
Wow.
Shannon
You ranked
Sharp.
Sterling
I think he's a
Sharp?
top 40, so he just misses for me. He's a top 40, but I had 2 tight ends in my honorable mentions, and neither of them was Shannon Sharp. He's my 9th tight end of all time. We're gonna get to why, but very good player too.
I think honestly, he's one of the best blocking tight ends of all time.
No, he
Wait,
didn't block.
He blocked a good amount. He blocked. You see, you're the type of fan that does not give people like Shannon Sharp enough respect. The dude, yes, he received a lot, but when he was asked to block, he blocked, especially during the playoff runs.
My opinion, there was a clip of him, and he said he doesn't block. So that's what I get from.
But he obviously, because he was a very great receiving tight end, but when he was asked to get in the box and block, he really was not that bad.
Okay, maybe
So,
maybe
eight-time
you
Pro
watch
Bowler.
maybe you watch more Shannon Sharp than me. I just
I
totally
do.
couldn't block.
I
That's
do.
why I didn't rank it.
I love that the late '90s Broncos are like my favorite football to watch. But anyways, 8-time Pro Bowler, 10,000 receiving yards, 800 receptions in 14 seasons with 62 touchdowns. Pretty good stat line. 2-time Super Bowl champion. I mean, obviously had the John Elway effect, had the great guy throwing it to him. But honestly, for a tight end, he played for what? What did I say? 13 seasons? 14 seasons, excuse me. I mean, honestly, a very long and illustrious career. He had a good stat lines. I mean, he's a multi-time 1,000-yard receiver for as a tight end. That's pretty impressive. 2-time multi-numbered touchdowns in 1996 and 1998. I mean, honestly, just a overall great receiving tight end. And honestly, I think he deserves to be on this list.
Yeah, I can understand why you have him ranked. I mean, Bailey good player. Bailey good receiving tight end. The blocking wasn't there. He said he wasn't a willing blocker, and he personally, if I'm ranking you as a tight end, you have to be a very strong combination of both, in my opinion, or at least a capable blocker. I just personally didn't see him as a capable blocker. I saw him as a liability in that aspect. So whenever I'm looking at, unless you're putting up 1,400 yards and putting up elite receiver numbers as a tight end, which you put elite tight end numbers, but if you're not a willing blocker, you have to put up elite receiving numbers as a tight end. I just didn't see that in him, so that's why I couldn't rank him. But he's still a top 40 because of how good he was at the time as a tight end and the impact he had on the kind of receiver / tight end player that we see a Travis Kelce being a tight end who lines up out wide from time to time. But yeah, just thought he was more of a receiver than that typical tight end. That's why I couldn't rank him. But yeah, Bailey good player, had an amazing career too with the 2 Super Bowls and all the All Pros. John,
Where do you have him at, John?
I didn't rank him, but I just had a tough time for some reason ranking tight ends. I only
yeah,
had
same.
the 3 guys on there, so
Wow,
I
it's
just
funny.
had
Yeah.
a tough time ranking.
How many tight ends
don't-
did you guys have?
3.
I had 4.
Okay, I had the 3 tight
I
ends
have
in the
these
top
4.
15. Then I have a tight end at 29, 30, and 31. But I don't know if they're going to make this list because we still have some other players to get to.
Oh no, I have another tight end after Shannon Sharp. My bad. And it's not Mike Ditka. I know that's what Nick has.
I have Mike Ditka at 31, my 6th tight end. But anyway, John,
Yeah.
who is number 26?
I'm going with Steve Largent at 26.
Ooh, good
shocker, but
That's a good pick.
shocker, I disagree, but solid pick.
I just think similar to Larry Fitzgerald with the only one All-Pro season, but he did have longevity, and he retired with the most yards and touchdowns, and was the first receiver ever to have 100 touchdowns, which the Alabama Antelope never got to.
Okay, if you count playoffs, he had 102. His touchdown he averaged a touchdown every 5 catches, which is insane compared to like
I know. But just a similar to Larry Fitzgerald type guy, and the longevity was there, so I had him 20 actually on my list.
Okay. We need to stop with the Larry Fitzgerald type guys. Larry Fitzgerald is one of the most talented receivers, complete receivers to ever play. Give Larry Fitzgerald respect.
No, but just looking at statistics.
I guess you're saying the longevity statistics, the one first team All-Pro, Larry was robbed of multiple first team All-Pros, and he was one of the most talented receivers to ever play with the best playoff run of all time for a receiver. But anyway, I get what you're saying, so I'm just being petty. But
okay.
Anything to add? I didn't have Largent ranked. He's personally my number 15th receiver of all time, and my number 13th receiver, Chris Carter, is in my honorable mentions. So yeah, Largent wasn't going to make it, but still a very good player and had a long, nice career. So understandable ranking him. Just don't have him ranked. But I do have a guy ranked who played some football back in the 1940s and 50s. He won't be on the screen right. He won't be on the graphic right now because I'm gonna put it up with Largent, but I'll type him into underneath. This guy was number 19 on my list. The last guy remaining in my top 20 that hasn't been picked. Not surprised that he hasn't been picked, but Steve Van Buren. Graham, do you know who this is?
Who?
Steve Van Buren.
Okay, so I've heard of him. I had no care to watch him on film or anything because I
Yeah.
knew he was a top 32.
I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know who he was till you texted me about him.
Yeah, until you texted us about it. I didn't know who he was. I looked him up, and I was like, nah, he ain't that good.
Okay, he's he is good. Okay, so we're talking about a guy who had two over 1,000-yard rushing seasons in the 40s, averaging. He had a career average of 4.4 yards per attempt, but that was probably because he played a little bit longer than he should have. At the end of his career, he really struggled, but consistently 4.4 yards attempt, 4.7, 4.6, 4.6, 5.8, 5.6. So very good rusher on a per attempt basis. Led the league in rushing yards 4 times, led the league in rushing touchdowns 4 times, yards per game 5 times, yards per attempt once, and made first team All Pro 5 times. He's known as one of the best Eagles players of all time. I think you'd probably call him the best Eagles offensive player of all time. They have Reggie White on defense. So historic player for the Eagles organization. And just, very good power runner. He didn't do much as a receiver. That's why he's not higher on this list with all the accomplishments. Good kick returner, though, and he did play defense, although that doesn't count on his offensive ranking back in the day. But yeah, had a very good career for his time, led the league in a lot of stats, 5 for his team All Pros. I had to rank him. He's at number 19 for me. I think he's the kind of the typical power runner of the old day. The 40s, you had, of course, Marion Motley of the Paul Brown Cleveland Browns. You had Steve Van Buren, just one of the early power running backs who had an impact on the future NFL, and guys like Earl Campbell, Jim Taylor. So yeah, good player. Number 19. Anything to add on him?
No.
So,
Oh, man.
Graham didn't rank him because he doesn't know who he is. John just, he already had his list. So he's like, I'm not looking up this old head.
Okay, so this pick right here, number 28. This is going to be another unorthodox pick, and I know Nick is going to lose it when I say his name. I'm going with the greatest special teamer of all time. Chicago Bear legend.
Oh, wow.
Devin Hester. The most underrated NFL player of all time. The greatest special team guy. Kicked off a Super Bowl, returning a 103-yard kick return for a touchdown. The dude is just a GOAT. Does not have the receiving accolades to really help him out. But, I mean, the guy had 315 punt returns for almost 4,000 yards. That is ridiculous. If you put that in a running back's term, the dude is he's averaging almost 15, 16 yards of punt return. He's got nearly, out of 295 kickoffs, nearly 8,000 yards returning with 37 touchdowns. 37. That is absolutely ridiculous. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler for special teams. And honestly, when he was throwing the ball, he honestly was pretty good at catching the football. He was not that bad. But honestly, the greatest special teamer of all time, he deserves to be on this list. So I have him at 28.
Pause. We can do a top 10 special team and combine return specialists, punters, long snappers, kickers.
Nope, I'm keeping him here. He stays.
Whatever. He's just a skill guy. Devin Hester when Julio Jones is still on the board.
If it makes you feel better, Julio Jones is next on my list at 22 overall.
You're giving me for ranking Steve Van Buren, but you just ranked a special teamer. Well, I mean, all-time special teamer, 3 first-team All-Pros compared to a Julio Jones, one of the best receivers we've ever seen of all time on a receiver, running back, tight end list. I get he was labeled a receiver, but how are we going to rank his special team ability? I mean,
also was ranking people at special team ability.
I'll take that. I was ranking. Listen, I wasn't ranking them based on their special team ability. It's just whenever I talk about Gale Sayers to explain how talented he was, I had to throw in that he was arguably the best returner. He was the best returner in the league. So that gets into his talent aspect of his running back ranking. But
I think he's just a good skill guy. I think that counts as a skill.
Okay, John, you didn't even think of him, right?
I didn't think of it, but I don't mind it.
You don't mind?
I don't mind the pick.
I think it's a good value pick at 28.
It's a funny, weird pick. It's a Bill Belichick type of pick mentioned in the special team. I don't know. I
Gotta
don't
pick
even
him
know.
in the 5th round, you know.
The 5th
Nothing
round, but guys like
nothing-
Julio Jones.
It's a joke. Like it's a joke with the kicker because he always picks a kicker in the 5th round. It's so funny.
Okay, that one complete caught me off guard more than anything that we've maybe ever said on this podcast. But anyway, on to number 29. My tight ends are still not getting picked. John.
Oh, Graham, LSU won.
I know. I just got the. I've
18-4.
been watching it. I'm so happy. We're College World Series champions.
Okay,
Connor
My
McDavid
pick.
won MVP.
Woo.
Marvin Harrison
Love
at
it.
29.
Good pick. Good pick.
So 1,100 receptions, 14,500 yards, 128 touchdowns, 3-time first team All Pro. And from 1999 to 2006, he had over 1,100 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns in every season. One of the more consistent receivers to ever play, was always there for Peyton Manning, and was just one of the best receivers.
Yeah, he had the most receiving yards actually in the first 11 years of his career. That's more than Jerry Rice. Like you said, the consistent 1,000-yard seasons, and not just 1,000 yards, but we're talking about 15, 1,600, 1,700 yards year after year. Made first or second team All Pro every year in an 8-year span between 1999 and 2006. Consistency was there. He was a little bit on the smaller end, 6', 185, and wasn't the alpha talent of the other receivers. Although he was pretty good with his route running ability, I just think not being the ultra talent, is kind of what holds him back from like the other top receivers that we've mentioned. But he's still my number 8 receiver of all time, coming in at number 25 on my skill position ranking. So actually 4 spots higher than he falls here. Would you have him ranked, John?
21.
Okay, so Graham, would you have him ranked?
I had Marvin Harrison at 27, but now thinking about it, I could have had him a little higher.
So we all had him higher than he actually was picked, just because we
Mhm.
had different guys that we had to pick.
Yeah.
But who are we on now? Me.
Yes.
Who am I gonna pick? Oh, I'm gonna pick Julio Jones. Had him at number 23, and he falls to number 30. Julio Jones. Until I watched some Randy Moss and Justin Jefferson came into the league, I always thought Julio Jones was the most talented receiver of all time. A guy his size, he isn't quite the contested catch guy of a Calvin Johnson, but that's because Calvin Johnson set a ridiculous standard for that. But he isn't like no scrub at that. He's still one of the better jump ball receivers in the history of the game. But you look at the fact that his run after catch ability, his size and speed combination is insane. He is electric running after the catch. He's big and strong and hard to tackle. And you compare that with still a pretty fairly good route runner in my opinion, and just all around game. Route running, contested catch, run after catch, speed, size. I think he's everything you want in a receiver. He was the leader in yards per game in NFL history a couple years ago until Justin Jefferson passed him. And he was leading it by 10 yards like at 1.2 years ago until he completely fell off. But that's the thing. If he didn't completely fall off, I think he could have pushed a top 15 ranking on this list. It's just the last years he's really fell off as a player.
Yep.
But you're still looking at it. Him or AB was the best receiver in the league with Calvin Johnson for a good span of years. So, yeah, very good, strong career. He had one of the best Super Bowl catches of all time. John remembers that, I'm sure.
We won.
All that matters.
Just one of the more complete receivers of all time, like I mentioned with Fitzgerald, but I think he's more talented than Fitzgerald too.
Yeah.
Only knock on him is, again, only 2 first-team All-Pros. Doesn't stand out as crazy. And only 60 touchdowns. He was never a big red zone touchdown threat. That's kind of what separated him and Calvin Johnson for me, why I had Johnson ranked over Julio. But I still think he should have went much higher than 30, as I have him at 23. Would you guys have him ranked?
22.
I had him at 24.
This is weird. We've had some guys here that we had ranked very high, but just ended up being low. So you had Devin Hester ranked at 23. Interesting.
I had him ranked at 21, actually.
Wow. Okay. What made you think of him? Like, I'm surprised you even thought of him.
Honestly, I was just looking through like mid 2000s
2000s
highlights.
receivers were stacked.
I know. And one random punt return happened. It was the Devin Hester punt return against what team was it? He ran backwards 20 yards, cut back, and ran like 65 yards back to the end zone and scored. It was like absolutely ridiculous. That's what made me think of him. But speaking of, I'm gonna go with another interesting pick. I've kind of ended this pick with very interesting picks. This guy honestly probably needed a walking cane by the end of his career, his illustrious 16-year career. Frank Gore. Yep.
Wait, what?
Oh, there it is.
Frank?
I love Frank. I think Frank was honestly so
Over
underrated.
Thurman Thomas, Marion Motley, as far as running backs go, over other players like Antonio Brown, Raymond Bailey, Lance Alworth, Kellen Winslow, John Mackey, Sterling Sharp, Antonio Gage, Jason Witten, Mike Ditka, you already ranked Chris Carter. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, 240 games. My lord, that is a huge beating for a running back. I mean, the guy rushed for nearly 4,000. He rushed for 16,000 yards to the exact, 81 touchdowns, had around 4,000 receiving yards. I mean, the guy was, pretty solid. 5-time Pro Bowler. Should have probably been a first team All Pro, but he didn't get it.
Okay, 2006 was his best season, 1,600 yards. He never had more than 1,214 outside of that, and he never had more than 10 touchdowns in a season. But 2006 was his best season, but that was LaDainian Tomlinson's insane season. So
Exactly.
he was second team All Pro that year. So maybe that's a first team All Pro year in another year, but
Yeah.
he still never had like a super strong year.
I mean, he's just always been there. Like,
Besides
I mean,
that year,
the
yes,
guy
he's always
even
been there, but like he doesn't like. I just don't think he's an all time player.
you see in my opinion, you don't necessarily have to like jump out as long as you're consistently pretty good. And I mean, he was elite. Started off the first, I would say, what would you say? His first 10 years of his career, he was probably a top 10 running back during those first 10 years of his career in the
Yeah,
NFL.
I get what you're saying. The consistency at
And
that
then
position
and
is
then
very impressive.
he very actually towards the end of his career, I was even saying 2020 when he played for the Jets, he wasn't necessarily bad. He was a good number 2 running back for them. He was a good change of pace. He fit his role great. I think he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Ooh, I think it's gonna be hard to be first ballot, but what he
Should
did,
be a Hall of Famer at least.
he
Yeah.
should. I'd have to look at my stuff, but anyway,
What? You have to
I'm-
think about that?
I'm gonna pull up something and while you talk, but 4.3 yards per carry to play that long and still be over 4 yards a carry is very impressive. I'm looking at running backs though. I'd rather rank Bronco Nagurski, the Bears running back in the 30s, the big old dude who was, trucking people, didn't have an amazing statistical, but still high yards per carry. I'm just going on a spiel now, but anyway, do you even know who that dude is?
Who? Wait, sorry, say it again.
Bronco Nagurski.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him, but
You heard of him because I mentioned him to you one time in school, but
I think so.
yeah. But anyway, I'm gonna see what I have for Gore. But John, you make the last pick.
Rounding out the list at number 32, I'm going with Lance Allworth.
Ooh, he was my next guy too. So nice pick.
10,000 receiving yards, 85 touchdowns, 6-time first team All Pro. And something that really just jumped out to me when I was looking at the stats was nearly 19 yards per reception for his career. And that is just what elevated him for me. And he was number 26 on my list.
He was
So
number
Lance
26
Allworth.
on my list too. Graham, do you have anything to say about him, real quick?
Where did y'all have him ranked?
I had him 26.
26.
Okay, real quick. I do have Frank Gore as a Hall of Famer. I have Adrian
Okay.
Peterson, LeSean McCoy, Frank Gore, and then I do not have Marshawn Lynch as a Hall of Famer. I'm just looking at running backs.
Wait. You have LeSean McCoy as a Hall of Famer, not Marshawn Lynch?
No, LeSean McCoy had a very Lynch was just big, beast mode, cool guy. LaShawn McCoy had a very 2010 to 2015 very good run, and plus he had more longevity than a Marshawn Lynch, and he was a
Okay.
more all-around player. But anyway, that'd be interesting. We should do all our lifetime stuff soon. That'd be fun to do. But anyway, so 32 Lance Alworth. Lance Alworth, here's where I'm at with him. I have a lot to say about him. He is the hardest guy to rank in anything all time in NFL history, in my opinion. And there's a reason for that. Will you look at just his basic stats? He led the league in receiving 3 times, receptions 3 times, touchdowns 3 times. Like you said, the ridiculous yards per reception. Had 3 times where he averaged over 100 yards a game for the season in his career in the 1960s. And he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 straight both team all-pro teams. But there's a big hold on. So what I mentioned, all that stuff about him makes him think his statistical peak, his all pros, and his just yards per reception makes it seem like he should maybe be a top 15-ish player on this list. But the big elephant in the room is those 16 first team all pros, they were all AFLs because he was in the AFL. My knock on Lance Alworth is it's hard to rank him because whenever he moved into the NFL, after having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons in the 1960s in the AFL, he moved into the NFL and went down to 608 yards, 487, 195, and then retired. So, yes, his first NFL season was at age 30, but the big 400-yard drop-off is a little questionable. And watching him, his talent, he wasn't a very refined route runner, just a very fast player, good leaper, and able to catch balls downfield. Just again, didn't seem like a very refined player with his routes, in my opinion, and moving to the NFL and falling off that quickly when the AFL is said to have pretty significant weaker defenses than the NFL. It's hard for me to rank him as a top player. Yeah, John, you're good. You're good, what you just texted. But anyway,
right.
yeah, Lance Alworth, interesting player to rank. Did you have him ranked, John or Graham?
I did have Lance Alworth ranked. I had him ranked at 32nd.
Wow, so he falls right where you had him ranked. I'm gonna fill out the remaining graphic. Start to name some honorable mentions, y'all.
Okay, so the guys who I have on my list that was not picked was Michael Irvin, who I had ranked 22nd overall, which I actually have him and another guy I'll say ranked above Frank Gore, but I just thought Frank Gore was a cool pick, so I wanted to pick him. So I also
Who's your
had
other guys ranked above?
I have Michael Irvin at 22, and then actually another Cowboy, 23, Jason Witten.
So why didn't we put Michael Irvin at 31?
Because I think Frank Gore's cooler.
Okay, but we're going off the better player. I think Joe Burrow is one of the coolest players in NFL history, but I didn't rank him. Well, this is also.
I just mean I don't know.
But
Now thinking about it, I actually think Frank Gore has a better career than Michael Irvin.
Interesting, but okay.
And I also had on an honorable mention for me, as crazy as it is, Justin Jefferson.
I had him as my 16th receiver of all time, and I went 12 receivers deep. So, he honestly wasn't too far. Just because, the Offensive Player of the Year, one of the best receiving seasons of all time on his resume. In my opinion, the most talented receiver of all time. The most yards per game for a receiver in all time. The start to the career. It's after
ridiculous.
Patrick Mahomes' third season, I had him at 16 for quarterbacks, and
I think
16 for receivers.
If we make this list in 5 years, he'll be on this list.
Yeah, what Patrick Mahomes is as a quarterback, I think Jefferson is as a receiver. So I think in a few years, Jefferson's going to be in a top 10 receiver conversation. But anyway, some honorable mentions for me. I had 26. My top 26 guys all make this. I had 6 guys that you guys had on here that I didn't. Most of them were Graham's picks, I think. But my number 27, Raymond Bailey. Very good player for the Johnny Unitas Colts. Really the pioneer of the toe drag. Just you see clips of him making catch after catch on the sideline. The 1958 championship game, perhaps the most famous game in NFL history. Raymond Bailey was the star of that game. Looking at his stats, that game he had 178 receiving yards, 12 receptions, 1 touchdown. Very impressive playoff game. One of the best playoff performances for a receiver of all time in that game. Again, he just wasn't. He kind of had. He had a different. One leg was bigger than the other, so he had a little bit of a weird thing to deal with there. But he was also didn't have very good vision. I heard, so he wasn't the best talent watching him. But he was a very tough, good sideline receiver who put up good numbers and made all pros. Antonio Brown, number 28. We all know the talent he is. The longevity just wasn't there. Kellen Winslow, John Mackey, Mike Ditka, very complete tight ends for their time periods. John Mackey, another one who played for the Colts. Ditka had first 1,000-yard receiving season for a tight end of all time in 1961 as a rookie, and he was a very tough player, good blocker, good catcher, could run through your defense. Kind of reminds me a lot of Gronk. I think Gronk is Mike Ditka, but 2.0, and he did it in the modern era. Number 32 for me was Sterling Sharp. Listen, as far as short career goes, if Terrell Davis is a Hall of Famer, it makes absolutely no sense why Sterling Sharp is not a Hall of Famer. He played 7. I looked up Sterling Shepard. Let me look up Sterling Sharp. Sterling Sharp played, I think, 7 seasons. 7 seasons. Made first team All Pro 3 times. Led the league in receptions 3 times. Touchdowns twice. Receiving yards once. If you watch him, he was kind of like Antonio Brown. He was really like Antonio Brown, in my opinion. Had a little bit of Randy Moss in his game. So I had to rank him at 32. But my other honorable mentions, Thurman Thomas, very good Bills running back. Marion Motley, very good power back, who had an impact on the NFL as far as breaking the color barrier.
Don Hudson third?
Back in the 40s, played for the Paul Brown Browns. Antonio Gage, Jason Witten, very good tight ends. Witten, in my opinion, maybe the best blocking tight end of all time, and he put together very good, consistent seasons.
Hudson is not.
Chris Carter at number as another honorable mention. You had him ranked though. Those are my honorable mentions. You guys mentioned some before we led.
So wait, these are the 5 players that were not on this list, but were on mine. I'm just gonna list them though: Curtis Martin, Antonio Brown,
AB
Tony-
over Don Hudson.
Tony Dorsett, Michael Irvin, and Thurman Thomas.
Tony Dorsett's an interesting one.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about Tony Dorsett.
He was a 70s
Whoa.
Cowboys running back, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, why is Joe complaining about Don Hudson being 30?
Yeah. Wow.
Wait, here.
Switch seats before we end this podcast in 2 minutes.
You can sit.
Okay, what's up, Joe? We're going to make this short and sweet. Don Hudson, 8-time first team All-Pro, led the league in almost every receiving stat.
What years? What years?
1935 to 1940.
I like this guy.
2
We're putting Gill on the
MVPs.
pod.
2 MVPs. One
Bro,
of the fastest-
1935?
Yes, he was the first receiver to run routes. A lot of the routes you see in the NFL, Don Hudson established. He was being double and triple team. He was Tyreek Hill back in the day. The deep threat, the touchdown catch, amazing route runner.
Tyreek Hill back in the day?
He's a better
They were
route.
all white.
He's
They were all white.
Okay, that's my only complaint. That's my only. Maybe you can. There wasn't when he played in the NFL. There wasn't any black players in that time, but he was still arguably the fastest player in the world. He was one of the fastest people of all time. 9.8, 100-yard dash. That's historic. Tyreek Hill is probably only a split second faster than that. So comparing, he was Tyreek Hill's speed with modern routes, with 2 MVPs, no other
He
receiver.
was not Tyreek Hill's speed.
You don't even know who he is. Look it up. He was the numbers don't lie. 9.8.
Bro, I bet there's no footage of this man.
There's a few footage. 9.8.
Bro, were cameras even
100
invented,
second
Nicolas?
dash. There was cameras. Yes, cameras were invented in the 1800s. He played in the 1930s and 40s. But anyway, historic career. Look him up. Watch his documentary. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, our pod's about over. What do you think of our list, Joe? Quick, 1
I
minute.
honestly think it's terrible.
Oh, wow.
What do you dislike strongly about our list?
Other than Don Hudson.
Why is Devin Hester on this list?
Hey.
Graham doesn't know what he's doing. He ranked a special teamer.
I
Why is Lance Allworth over AB?
because of like the accolades were insane and the impact on the NFL. But I only have him 2 spots ahead of AB, so it's either way.
Yeah, I also have Antonio Brown.
Why is Devin Hester over Julio Jones, and why is Frank Gore anywhere near this list? He was never a first-team All-Pro.
Because they're both great NFL stories. Devin Hester's the best special teamer of all time. He's a skill
We're
player.
not ranking special teamers.
But he's a skill player. It counts.
Best special teamer is Justin Tucker, then Adam Vinatieri, then Devin Hester.
Okay, I'm not gonna argue that.
Who is Steve Van Buren?
Steve Van Buren, he played for the Philadelphia Eagles back in the 40s and 50s.
Long time ago.
Really good power back, led the league in a lot of stats. 5-time first-team All-Pro.
Bro, were there?
Listen, those black players started to come in around his time. And
How many? How many?
I don't know.
10?
He's the best offensive player in the Eagles' history. So give him some respect. Anyway, that's our pod. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to post this list on Instagram. Be sure to leave some comments and let me know where we were wrong and why we're wrong about our list. But anyway, that's it. Let's check our last comment. Oh, this is comedy.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.
Devin Hester.